Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Penn State Extension Livestock Team Podcast, the Barnyard Broadcast. As always, I am your host, Maddie Horkler. To kick off the new year, we're going to go ahead and start a new season of the Barnyard Broadcast. To celebrate our new season, we are going to start a brand new segment called the Research Update. This segment aims to keep producers informed about the research that's going on at Penn State University Park. We are going to focus mainly on the animal science department and the research that is going on in there. However, we may branch out to other departments within this segment. It is going to be an interview-style podcast episode, and we are going to start those interviews with Dr. Tara Felix and her advisee, Ingrid Fernandes. They've been working diligently on research, and we are going to go ahead and listen to an update that they have for us today. Without further ado, let's get into the conversation. Why don't we go ahead and get started with this episode with some introductions. So, Tara, if you would like to introduce yourself.
Thanks, Maddie. My name is Tara Felix. I am the Penn State Extension Beef Cattle Specialist, and I have been working for Penn State Extension for the last approximately 10 years. I have an appointment on campus where my primary role is adult education, and I also teach classes in resident instruction.
Hi, Maddie. My name is Ingrid. I'm a graduate student here at Penn State. I'm co-advised by Dr. Felix and Dr. Cantor. And I started here in 2023. And since then, we are working with beef and dairy cattle.
Cool. Thanks for both of you guys for joining us today. We're going to go ahead and just start with a little bit of background as well as some main goals. So, Tara, would you just like to elaborate maybe a little bit maybe on the background as well as your goals going into this project?
Sure, thanks. So we started working with progeny out of dairy markets when I very first came to Penn State. In 2016, of course, that market was predominantly Holstein, but with the rise of the use of beef semen beginning in 2018, and the need to shift our focus, we began researching in my lab the use of beef on dairy calves in feedlot systems in 2020 and 2021. The first iteration of those beef on dairy projects included just trying to figure out what the best bull was to use to generate calves that would be productive in the beef supply chain. However, we rapidly progressed to these are not developing dairy heifers, but they're not feedlot cattle and they're not feedlot Holsteins either. We have an entirely different group of animals that we're working with here, and we really need to understand those a little bit better. And so pretty quickly we shifted focus to Ingrid's project, which is what are some of the challenges and opportunities that we see with these beef on dairy calves as we take them all the way from wet calves at birth off the dairy farm up through the beef supply chain.
Ingrid, why don't you go ahead and tell me a little bit about your project?
Sure. So as Felix explained, these animals, they are born in a dairy and they're going to go through the beef chain. So they have a different management throughout that pre-weaning period. And that can bring some challenge to those animals during that period and maybe later in their life. So we want to see how pneumonia, bovine respiratory disease that happens during that period could affect the long-term growth performance, carcass traits of those animals. So what we did, we sourced 150 animals from 2 different dairies, and we brought them to a calf ranch where they were raised until weaning, which was around 2 months of age. During that period, we assessed health, and with lung ultrasonography, we assessed lung consolidation, which is one of the consequences of BRD. And we did that at weaning. So we identified 37 animals that had lung consolidation and the rest of the animals, they were healthy. So at post-weaning, we observed that those animals had a reduction in average daily gain up to 3 weeks of post-weaning. However, those animals that had that reduction in average daily gain, those losses, they recovered that up to 8 months of age. So, and numerically, they even gain a little bit better compared to the health animals. So they had a compensatory gain over that period. And then we took those animals to the feedlot because we want to see how they would perform and how their the carcass characteristics would be for those animals. And so we saw that the growth performance was not affected on those animals that had lung consolidation at weaning. However, on the carcass side, we saw that marbling was affected by almost 8%. There was a reduction in marbling of almost 8%. And we know that marbling is important because it's the fat in the inside of the meat. And that's important for the consumers because steak with more fat tastes better, essentially. So we want to see an animal that has more marbling. We want a carcass with more marbling. And those animals that had lung consolidation had a reduction in marbling. And over 75% of the producers that sell beef cattle, they sell on a carcass, a quality breed basis, meaning that depending on the quality of the carcass, they're going to pay better or they're going to have a discount on that carcass. So more marbling, better payment, essentially, for that carcass. So that was the main finding that we saw for this research, is that the lung consolidation observed at 2 months of age on those beef and dairy calves affected marbling and consequently would affect probably the profit of that producer 400 days later from when we identified that disease on those calves.
I think one of the most important things, Maddie, when we think about Ingrid's research is that when we buy and sell beef cattle, 75% of the beef cattle in the United States are bought and sold on a grid-based system. So the fact that an insult at 60 days of age can impact how that animal, the economics of that animal on that grid-based system, as Ingrid said, 400 days after the insult, is a really critical finding. We have known for some time that there is a quote unquote marbling window. And in normal beef production, in conventional beef production cycles, we have attempted to adjust this window through programs like creep feeding or early weaning, which are sometimes successful and sometimes not. Perhaps, and this is a hypothesis, but perhaps because we are making those adjustments between 90 and 200 days of age, whereas the insult that impacted Ingrid's calves was at just 60 days of age. And so I think as beef cattle producers, one of the things we can think about, one of the takeaways we can have from this research is there's the potential for how we manage these calves, or how we expect the cow to manage these calves very early in life. If we're selecting cows with poor milk production, inadvertently or advertently, to save on cow efficiency costs, that has the potential to impact the marbling outcomes later in that animal's life. Dr. Chad Deckow always teases me because, he's a geneticist and I'm a nutritionist, and I say I can screw up really good genetics with poor nutrition, but I can't fix really bad genetics. And so he says it a little bit different way. He says, if genetics is the ceiling, nutrition is the floor, meaning you, as beef cattle producers, we're very, very proud of the genetics that we put into these animals in an effort to get to the highest amount. 85% of the cattle in the United States today grade choice or better. That's just a phenomenal outcome in the last 20 years that our beef cattle producers have achieved. But if we are inadvertently impacting those genetics early in that animal's life, we can have a real impact on the final carcass outcomes. And I think that's a key takeaway for beef cattle producers. We're not all going to switch to raising beef on dairy overnight. And yes, the beef on dairy model is a little bit unique, but we can take the principles that we're learning here in this model and apply them back to conventional beef production systems as well.
So when we compare these animals, the beef on dairy animals with the beef animals, the native, they are raised different. And we see what we observe is that they undergo more challenges because they are born a dairy, they are raised as a dairy, they don't stay with their mamas, and they're also marketed many times throughout their life. There is that possibility. They can be marketed at birth, they can be marketed at weaning or before going to the feedlot. So those challenges also increase the chances of these animals getting sick, some diseases, the immune system to be suppressed. And those diseases, it's what we are speculating, especially early, like Felix mentioned, when these animals are undergoing that marbling window. Those diseases have the potential to affect the production of beef later in their life. And we see that those effects in carcass is not just like we imagined that we could just manipulate it in the feedlot. They come much earlier, and it's because those animals, the producers are not awarded for better management or better strategies, that it's still a problem. It can still be a problem for the beef producer later in the animal's life.
And I think that's a great point, Ingrid. These multiple sale points really challenge the beef on dairy system more so than the conventional system. But regardless of whether we're in a beef on dairy production system or whether we're in a conventional beef system, bovine respiratory disease is the costliest disease across all cattle systems. And so this finding that's associated with bovine respiratory disease addresses a real economic issue that we know we have in all beef production systems. And whether that bovine respiratory disease comes when that calf is 200 days of age or whether it comes at 60 days of age, this is still a potential area where future research needs to address what the outcomes are and what some of the novel techniques could be to manage these animals to prevent those disease upsets throughout the supply chain, as Ingrid mentioned.
So Ingrid, it was really fascinating and great to hear about the project and the work that you've been doing. So kind of what's next in this process or for you?
Yeah, so we're gonna still work with beef on dairy calves, especially during the pre-weaning period, but we're gonna dig deeper on nutrition. We're gonna focus more on nutrition since that it's Dr. Felix' specialty, and that's gonna be the next steps.
Cool. So you're wrapping up. Is there any final thoughts or takeaways that you guys would like to express?
Thanks, Maddie, for having us. I think it's great that we're getting the information that's going on at Penn State out there. You know, lest folks think that we are just beef on dairy researchers, I want to point out that we have done some fascinating projects these last couple of years in alternative forages, and we'll continue those projects into the new year. Folks can come to Ag Progress Days and hear the results of those projects. We're also going to be starting some research on campus with our Haller farm. Mitch Stevens is our manager at the Haller farm, and we're really excited to be starting some trials with him this spring and fall, investigating the impacts of nutrition and management strategies on both stocker calves in forage-based systems and our mama cows.
Sounds very exciting. I can't wait to talk about it. All right. Thank you guys. And
Thank you very much.
Thanks for having us, Maddie.
Well, that wraps up the research update episode for today. If you would like more information about the research referenced by Dr. Tara Felix and Ingrid in this episode, you can go ahead and find those published papers linked below in their show notes. You can also find their bios there as well. If you would like any more information just like this, you can head right over to the Penn State Animal Science Department website or the Penn State Extension website at extension.psu.edu. As always, thank you for listening, and I will talk to you later.